you've been doing these. So wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn from each other, not just today, but for many of the sessions. In presentation fashion, I do have a PowerPoint, not too many slides, but I do want it to help us lead our discussion today. So Amber, if you want to go ahead and pull that up for us. The one thing I want to make sure everybody has handy is pen and paper. This is going to be very much an interactive kind of working session. I am both, and Amber, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll give a little bit of background about myself, but I am a certified diversity executive, as I've mentioned. My background is a liberal arts education in Spanish, fluent in Spanish, and then after working, went back and got my MBA. I have a master's in business, and I've been doing consulting ever since and coaching in the human performance and change management space. And I've devoted myself to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space over the last 6 years or so. I really like to call my approach coachalting because I do a combination of consulting and coaching. And today will be kind of a lot of that in terms of where I'm here to offer up some key concepts, some ideas, that supported by research, but also really supported by, I think what you have all experienced is our lives in professional careers and the importance of mentorship as well as sponsorship. So what I'll do is really guide everyone through a series of thought processes, and it is very much reliant upon all of us to share our experiences and to learn from each other. So what I propose is that if you're not talking, to stay on mute, but do not hesitate to come off of mute and share your perspectives. And you'll see I'll key it up throughout for questions, comments, and sharing of your personal stories. So just to build upon this, some other things that are very important to me are, I am a part of Inforum. I'm based out of Michigan. This is a women's leadership and networking organization. And my colleague Mita is on as well. And she and I actually facilitate together for that. And that is a very, very important aspect of my career that I really love doing. And then I serve on a board for Living Arts, again, a Detroit-based nonprofit that's about bringing transformative art to Detroit youth. Because I am not all work and I am play and I have other aspects of my life, I have been married for almost 25 years. I'm the mother of 3 and the mother of a dog. And just to share, you know, it's been a really emotional week for me. I have my 22-year-old is graduating from college this weekend. So just that I've got to admit, like the tears just kind of, it's been, I keep trying to go back and look through pictures and like write her a card and I can't even get myself through it. So anyways, really excited to have a wonderful distraction of today of being able to share my learnings and then listen and learn from all of you. So if you want to go to the next slide, Amber, what today is all about is really, and you saw about kind of this importance of mentorship. We're also going to talk about sponsorship. And these things are so important to careers and to development, but they also can be so powerful when we combine it and look at it with the DEI lens. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the important differences between mentorship and sponsorship. And some of you may know this already, but it's always important to revisit that and kind of have those clear distinctions. We're going to talk about the impacts of mentorship and sponsorship, especially in the context of DEI. And this is where I say, my guess is each and every one of you probably has a story of where mentorship, sponsorship helped, and conversely, where the lack of it, right, may have had a cost. We're going to talk about how to explore finding a mentor and a sponsor, right? A lot of times these things happen organically, but after our discussions today, you might see that you need to be more intentional in either finding a mentor sponsor or being a mentor sponsor. So I've got some thoughts and ideas about that, but also again, collectively, you all have a wealth of experience, and I think you'll have some amazing insight to offer. And that will lead into kind of leaning into your own personal journey and identifying what are some next steps that you need to take or that you want to take in terms of mentorship and sponsorship. And again, with that DEI lens. Okay, so anybody have any kind of administrative, logistical, any questions at this point before we dive in? And don't forget to have your pen and paper ready. All right, well, let's get started. Amber, if you'll be kind enough to go to the next slide. So what's the difference? And I'm going to throw it out there to all of you, because again, I am not the only one in this world who has personal professional experience. I really want to hear from all of you. So to you, what is a mentor? And you can feel free to put it in the chat, or you can just come off mute. What does a mentor mean to you? Great. Somebody put someone who helps you network. Great. Other ideas, thoughts. Someone who offers guidance. Excellent. Thank you for that. Someone who helps show you the way. Someone who has similar values to me and is able to guide me on a path. Wonderful. I love this idea of thinking about values. Someone who shares from their past experience. Someone who listens and shows transparency. I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Mentors prepare you, sponsors speak for you with others and prepare the way for your advancement. Very well said, Lisa. And hi, Lisa, nice to see you. Someone who's a sounding board for your ideas. Wonderful, right? It's almost kind of this risk-free way where you can test ideas, right? Without being worried about the politics of work or it reflecting on, getting back to you. It's kind of a safe, free zone, which is really critical. Listen, offers perspective. Helps to navigate through systems and organizations. Critical, right? Especially if you're working for really large and kind of political engines, so to speak. Having that is always important, but that navigation can be so crucial. Someone who models positive behavior. I love that idea, right? Of really sort of being a role model for you. Someone who will help you bounce back after a fall. Oh, Esther, that's so wonderful to think about, right? Because we tend to not give ourselves kind of grace at times, right? Remind ourselves that we're not perfect, that we need to make mistakes, we need to take risks, and to have that support system after, right, taking those things that might not go as well as we think is really important. These are amazing, amazing inputs. Any others? Dr. Pearson, thank you. Mentors provide guidance support on coping in the work world, and sponsors speak for you in your absence while ensuring you have access to the resources needed to advance. So well said. Yes, this idea of guidance and support from a mentor and sponsors speaking up for you and giving you access, right? That word of access is really, really important. Thank you for sharing that. So Amber, if you'll go ahead and just show my slide, I think you all have really covered all of the essence of what mentorship and sponsorship are. And while they may have some overlap, I think what's important to realize is that there is a difference and that they are not the same. They're not interchangeable. So as many of you talked about, right, a mentor provides advice and guidance. They can help shape your career ambitions. Somebody talked about, right, being a sounding board, right? You need a safe place at times where you can talk about those things, and being able to do that where there's not going to be repercussions for the job you're in is really, really essential. Helps with navigation. Several of you talked about that, right? And all the layers of an organization and that networking. One of the things about a mentor that doesn't always happen, but if possible, should be scheduled, right? Then it really becomes more of a ritual and a formal relationship, and it optimizes what it can be. And you're driving that relationship. I think what Dr. Pearson just talked about kind of hits on that when we move into the sponsorship area, right? A mentor is someone where, although it's scheduled, it really is someone that you can reach out to when you need to, and you can leverage as much as you need it, right? A sponsor, and this is a lot of what you all touched on, right, is really champions for you, right? And you may not be in the room. Oftentimes you can't be in the room, right? You're absent, as someone said, because of your role or position or the organization dynamics. And so that person is there speaking up for you when you're not there. They open doors. They give you the word access, right? They give you access to opportunities, to visibility. And a really successful sponsorship program has intentional results that both you and the person are aware of, right? There's kind of clear goals, whether it's a promotion, whether it's, gaining really important knowledge or leverage or visibility, but it has a very intentional result and outcome that wants to happen. And the sponsor, in a way, is driving that more than the person who's being sponsored, right? The person who's being sponsored absolutely needs to talk about kind of their goals and their ambitions, but the sponsor is then going to kind of take that and run with it and put you in positions of getting that that access, that visibility, that opening of doors. Okay, so this is very simplified in terms of my slide, and I think you all did, thank you for all the inputs that you did and you provided each other. Any comments, questions that people want to key up right now? Again, I like to be very informal, as you can see. Feel free to come off mute. Anything that you feel like I've missed or that we've missed in the chat, or anything that I didn't emphasize enough that you really want to make sure we all emphasize and really have a focus on?
Hey, Michelle, this is Audrietta. One thing to emphasize perhaps is a mentor is probably easier to get than a sponsor.
Yes, fantastic point, Audrietta. Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly mentors you can identify pretty easily as you navigate through your organizations or through your industry, wherever you are or whatever your interests are. You can identify those folks, you can approach them, you can ask them if they would, if you can schedule time on their calendar. But as I've always heard about sponsors, you don't ask for them, and so it's like, okay, well, where do I get them and how do I get them? And, am I just totally wrong by identifying the fact that I don't have a sponsor or I don't feel that I have a sponsor? And, then how do I get there? So that's always what I've heard. It's just a matter of how do you get it and can you survive without one?
Great. Those are all amazing points. And I'm writing them down, and I want you to hold me to, because as we move through our discussion today, we're going to lean into exactly those things that you're talking about, right? Do I have a sponsor? Don't I have a sponsor? How do I get a sponsor? Do I, all those things you just talked about. I want to have some more discussion on those. So thank you for bringing all that up.
If I can add to that, I think from a mentoring standpoint, by the way, this is St. Rice.
Hi, St. Rice. Thank you for joining.
Glad to be here. And so from a mentoring standpoint, a lot of the information I'm sharing is from my personal experience. Yep. And that really does not cost me anything. I mean, I have to be transparent in some areas or what have you. But when I move into a sponsoring role, then I'm actually sharing, I'm sharing my network. I'm sharing some other things that all it takes is just that one, probably that one individual that I may introduce that could possibly mess that up, so it's a little bit more high risk, if from a sponsoring role, and opening up those opportunities. So for me, mentoring will help me determine whether or not this individual is somebody I feel I can sponsor. And very rarely do it flip where I sponsor and then mentor. So
That's great. A great point, right? Is that a lot of times, and thank you for bringing it up, it's so important, is a lot of times these sponsorship relationships grow from mentorship relationships. Because as you said it so well, I love that phrase that you used of high risk, right? There is a higher risk associated with sponsoring someone, right? And being sponsored, right? And so there's a level of trust that needs to be there. And so having that prior mentorship relationship can be really a valuable way for both the sponsor and the sponsee, or the mentor and the mentee, excuse me, to kind of test to see, is this something that does the sponsor have the ability to do it? And then again, the desire, is it a good fit, a good match, right? Because all of these relationships, mentor and sponsor relationships, they don't always, number one, they don't have to last forever, right? And number two, there really has to be a good fit there. And so St. Rice, what you're saying about all of this is so important. And then this other idea of the mentorship being easier in a sense, right? Because there's less of a cost, but it also, in a sense, it's more organic kind of what it requires, right? It's more about, it's easier kind of to share those things that a mentor needs than what a sponsor needs. Great. Love it. And Dr. Angela Pearson's put in there, a sponsor is an advocate for you. Absolutely. Sometimes mentors become sponsors. That's exactly what we've talked about. I'm just looking at the chat here to make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay. Any other things that folks want to add before we move into doing a little assessment of ourselves? Okay. Amber, if you will go to the next slide. Thank you. All right. So based on the conversation that we've just had, based on your personal experiences, which are so important and critical, take a moment and think about who mentors you and who sponsors you. Okay. So it is about who you're receiving from, who are your mentors and who are your sponsors. And as somebody pointed out, you might not have one, right? And so this is just really doing kind of an honest and risk-free assessment of where am I with who are my mentors and who are my sponsors. So I'll give you all just a few minutes to look through this and fill this out. When you're done, if you want to just kind of put a thumbs up or even a done in the chat, that way I can just get a gauge and I don't have to rush people along, but we don't have to sit waiting if everybody's also completed it. Right. Okay. Give folks just a few more minutes. Looks like about half of you are done. All right, so as you're finishing up, I'm gonna have Amber launch a quick poll that has just 2 questions, and it's anonymous. So it's just to get a sense, right? And I think you'll find it really helpful for all of us to share and see where people have landed. I have X number of mentors, excuse me. So I have 0 number of mentors, 1, 2, 3, or more than 3. And again, this is who is mentoring you. I have X number of sponsors, right? So again, 0, 1, 2, or 3. And then there isn't more than 3 in there. So if you have 3 or more, just do the last. Do 3. And then once you've done it, you can hit submit.
Okay, we have 72% participated. So you want to wait a little bit more?
That's great.
Okay.
It's
still going up.
Okay, good. I'm shooting for 100. No.
Yes.
Let's get everybody putting in.
Okay, we're at 80%.
Love it.
All right, so okay, still going up. Okay.
I love this. Thank you. Come on, team. We can do 100%. We got this. All right, what are we at, Amber? Should we go ahead and share?
Let's go ahead and share. We're at 83%.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so for the first question, I have X number of mentors, so people who are mentoring you, right? So 30% do not have a mentor, 27% have one, 23% have two, 9% have three, and 11% have more than three, okay? So a significant amount of people don't have a mentor. Or have two or less, which there's nothing wrong with that. But interesting, right? Especially kind of building off of what St. Rice said, right? Is that this mentorship, I don't know if I'm going to express it right. So come off mute and correct me or something, say, but it's almost like it's not a huge effort. It's not hard to be a mentor in a sense, right? I think there's, it's untapped, the amount of people who are out there or willing to mentor other people. And so to see this percentage, I think, is low compared to what it could be, right? And I want to open it up to those of you who have thoughts on this, who mentor others or looking for mentors. What do you think? Could the numbers reflect in part where people are in their careers? That's a really interesting question. I think I'm going to say it could, but I really don't think that's probably a key indicator. I coach and consult with people of all ages and all levels of their careers. And there doesn't seem to be a pattern based on that, actually. And I, again, welcome everybody else's thoughts, inputs on this. What are you thinking when you look at these results?
This is Enid May Jones, and I'm looking at those numbers for mentorship, and I'm looking at the numbers for sponsorship. So I don't think it relates to where people are in their career, because if it was so, then 41% of people who said they don't have a sponsor should be higher. Personally, I've been lucky and not have had the need for sponsors, but mentors as I go up has been relatively more important to me, because most times I end up in jobs where I've been the first to have had the job. So I really don't have a roadmap. So relying on, and I've been very fortunate to have women who have worked for Black and white, who have really taken a liking to me, and it just picks up the phone whenever I call and need that direction. So, that's the sponsorship thing. I think it's very difficult to me more than the mentorship. I don't know if it's because people don't know how to be sponsors as opposed to mentors. And I don't think people even know how to pick up the phone and do that call. I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable doing that call. And I just don't understand it, because I do that a lot for young people. Pick up that call and just able to sell somebody. I think it's that selling the person is where the problem comes in.
Mm-hmm. So when you mean pick up the call, do you mean the person asking for sponsorship or mentorship, or you mean the person offering that sponsorship?
Well, the person who is being asked to be the sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think sponsorship usually come in when somebody is looking for a job, and then they see a job, they probably don't know anybody there, but they know somebody who knows somebody, and then they may ask them, can you please give this person a call? And I've noticed that call, people are uncomfortable with it, or they don't know how to do it.
Yeah. So that's a great point too, is thinking about, and I love that, because you're thinking about sponsorship, I think almost in a way that a lot of times, even I sometimes forget about, is the fact that sponsorship isn't always about helping somebody move through their career in an existing organization, right? That sponsorship can be really important about helping people move to another place, or if they're an entrepreneur like myself, right? Sponsorship of getting recommendations, of getting keyed up for opportunities and things like that. Those are really key aspects of sponsorship as well. So thank you for bringing that up. And when we look at this, I want to just talk about, because I want to go back a little bit to what somebody said about kind of where they are in their career, right? Because sometimes you can think that somebody is so far up in their career, maybe they don't need that sponsorship as much. And maybe that might be one aspect of it. Can we go back to the poll for a minute? I think it went down for a second. Is everybody seeing the poll? Oh, there we go. Okay, so the sponsorship, more than half, almost half, 41% do not have a sponsor. 34% have at least one, and 16% have two, and 9% have three, or potentially, or there's more than three. That didn't show up for me on the screen. I must have not had it big enough. So I think the good news here is that, more than half of you have at least one sponsor, right? That 41%, I think it's, I want to kind of key up some of that, is that those of you who if you feel comfortable, right? Do you want a sponsor? Do you feel like you need a sponsor and you just don't have one? Or do you not have a sponsor because you don't feel like you have one? Or have you never really thought about it before?
Hi. I served in the military for 20 years. I was an attorney, and most of the time I was the only African American in my office. And I was the highest ranking. If we did have other people of color, I was usually the highest ranking one. I don't believe anyone ever mentored me. They worked me. They gave me jobs and opportunities because I think it benefited the organization, not necessarily because it benefited me, but I mean, I guess it was mutually beneficial, but I don't think it was out of a sponsorship view. It was more of this is what benefits our organization. And so I don't believe I've ever had a mentor or a sponsor. After leaving the military, I opened up my own business and I worked solo. And so I have a few attorneys I can call every once in a while if I have questions, but I don't believe I've ever had a mentor or a sponsor. And so I think part of that's due to the lack of other women and people of color in the legal profession in the military. And it's probably my lack of networking once I've gotten out of the military.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for your service. So this ties in. Thank you. Also, you keyed up exactly kind of having this DEI lens on it as well. And I want to just make sure, though, before we move to that next slide, I want to, so a couple comments I want to make sure that we hit. I mean, all of them are great. But I want to make sure people see. Stephanie wrote, I would love a sponsor, but have no idea how to make that happen. So thank you for that honesty and vulnerability. And somebody wrote about, in terms of sponsorship, many folks are super busy and do not have time. Normally mentors do not work in the same organization, but sponsors do. Absolutely. And Eugene Mack, I think you have to know more about the individuals who responded to the survey, their age and demographics. Absolutely. I would not call this like a statistically huge survey that should get posted in some kind of periodical, right? Just trying to get a pulse. Okay, and Dina also wrote, I would love a mentor since I am pivoting from the practice of law to DEI. So wonderful. You have potentially here a whole group of potential mentors here. So love that you put that out there. All right, so let's go to the next slide, Amber. And what we're going to hit into is thinking now, kind of switching it a little bit and thinking about who are you helping along, okay? So we've talked about what a mentor and a sponsor do. And so now I want you to kind of take that and think about who are you mentoring and who are you sponsoring? And same thing, take a moment, write that down. And when you are done, just put done in the chat. And not surprisingly, we're going to do another quick sort of pulse survey to see where people have landed. Great. And so Amber, do you want to launch that survey so as people are finishing up, they can do it? And don't feel rushed. We've got some time, but if you are done, you might as well go ahead and do the survey. And again, woohoo, we can get to 100%.
They're coming in quick this time. We're at 65% right now.
Love it.
I think we might get to 100 this time.
What are we at?
86%.
It's like a telethon. All right.
Come on, y'all. Let's get to 100%.
All right. Should we share?
Mm-mm.
No, you're going to wait. I love it. Pushing for that.
We're at 88%. Okay. I'm gonna share it now.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, so I am mentoring. All right, so you can see about 29% are not mentoring anyone. And then most of you, more than, way more than 50% are mentoring at least one person. A pretty 25% of you, a quarter of you are mentoring more than 3 people. So it's interesting. If you're mentoring, you kind of run into like you're mentoring one or you're kind of mentoring more than 3. So that's really interesting that a fair amount of you, well, I guess, and then actually it's very evenly split because 23% of you are mentoring between 2 and 3 people. Sponsoring, right? 65% of you are not sponsoring anyone. So couple thoughts on that, and then I'm really going to open it up, right? I think that hits into sponsorship is harder, right? You also, this is where you're positioned. You might think you're not in a role where you can sponsor someone. And I want to kind of sort of challenge that thinking and that really might be your reality, but having this awareness of, if you're new in your career, kind of though, as you move up, kind of having that mentorship and sponsorship lens will maybe really make it so that you end up mentoring and sponsoring more than you potentially would have. So I love hearing everybody's insights. I think they're extremely valuable and you all have so much to offer. So let me again, open this up. What are your reactions, your thoughts when you look at this survey? Did I lose you? Anybody?
Yes, this is Dr. Pearson. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Pearson.
Hello. When I look at the results of the poll, it helps me to understand that some people may not truly understand the difference between mentorship and sponsoring, but also if they really need one or the other or both. I've found in my own personal experience, the people that I'm mentoring, understanding what they need to get out of that relationship can be very difficult. So I know a lot of people don't have either one simply because they're not for sure as far as where they are in their career, if they need someone to help them along, or they're too busy to even think about having someone or asking someone to help them along. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I guess I would key up to those of you who are maybe farther along in your career or not. I mean, just anyone really. Do you think mentorship is important?
Yeah, this is Eugene Mack. Mentorship is important. And so that's why, if you've had the mentoring experience, it's easy to give mentoring to others. The issue around sponsorship is a little bit different, right? It really does mean that you have to have some degree of power or influence in order to be able to make the difference for someone, because otherwise you're really not opening any doors. You can't, provide opportunities and things of that nature. And for most people of color, or many people of color that I've worked with, we really haven't been in those positions where we can be at that level, right? So if you spend most of your career climbing the ladder, but only getting to a certain rung on the ladder, you really are limited to what you can do as far as sponsorship, but you can always do mentoring.
Excellent points. Thank you very much for sharing that. Exactly. And this is partly a big component of why mentorship and sponsorship needs to be can be so powerful with the DEI lens, right? Because that power of sponsorship, if you are like what Eugene, you just said, if you are a person of color and there isn't somebody who is a person of color to sponsor you, right? Those of us who are white, right? We need to look at things with a DEI lens and see who are we bringing up along the way and ensuring that we all have a responsibility of bringing up a diverse group of folks. So I want to move other comments. I want to leave it open. What else is on people's minds looking at this survey or building on what Eugene has said or anything in the chat? What would people like to add to the conversation?
I agree with Eugene, what he said. I want to add, sometimes we think as mentors, we have to have all the answers, right? We think it's like that master, apprentice, relationship, but it really isn't, nor do we have to have all the answers. One of the best mentors I've had was somebody who made quite a few mistakes in the beginning of their career path, and they were willing to be open and transparent about those mistakes. And I learned through their experiences, so, and also I think a key component too for a mentor is the ability just to listen, right? Because as we listen more, what we do is we allow them to kind of guide their path, and what we do is we just provide maybe some road signs or something like that. But that mentoring relationship is not about us having the answers. It's about helping them explore within themselves the answer. And then the sponsorship is a lot challenging. I agree. But sometimes I've found that maybe I've not aspired to that position where it's a position of leadership just yet. When I was in law enforcement, I hadn't been at that position, but I could see the ladder and how to get there. And so it wasn't about where I had been as much as it was helping someone else be in position and sponsoring them to the leadership that could help them get to that role. And so, and that's critical too, because if we have, in my opinion, if we have a really good image, or if our professional character and name is really good, then that carries a lot of weight that we don't give value to. Sometimes we only think it's tied to the title, but the influence of leadership is not connected to the title, it's connected to the influence. So.
Yeah, and one more comment to that, right, is really, the power of the mentor is the ability to coach, right? So I've never been on a sport team where the coach said, hey, I need you to run this ball, but didn't demonstrate or didn't give me the opportunity, or didn't have someone coach me on the specific details of how to run the football, right? Because I used to be a running back and I would fumble the ball all the time. So somebody taught me how to keep the ball in my arm by tucking it under. And that's the value of a mentor. So even though, you might be at a certain point in your career where you feel like you're stymied, you're really able to help somebody who's on their way to move at an accelerated pace because you're giving them the nutrients that they need in order to grow strong really fast. So, and getting all of this experience as a mentor and a coach really prepares you for the opportunity when you do get in a position to be an executive sponsor or a champion.
Amazing feedback. Thank you all. This idea of not having to be perfect, right? Of being a mentor for those of you listening who might not be mentoring people or are looking for mentors, right? Perfection is not the key. I love this, learning from mistakes, right? And this idea of providing nutrients. What an incredible analogy. That is just, thank you both for all of that. And as somebody said, love the power in that. Amen. Very true. So fantastic input and sharing. Thank you all. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. We're going to build upon all of this conversation. So it's going to continue, please. So Amber, if you'll move us forward, what I want to do is think about, take a quick moment and think about, as you look at your mentorship and your sponsorship and who you're mentoring and who you're not, kind of where are some of your strengths, where are your weaknesses. I think a lot of the stuff that Eugene and St. Rice just brought up too, even at that next level, is thinking about like, do I need to change what I'm looking for? Do I need to maybe broaden kind of what I think about I can bring to the table, right? A lot of times we tend to underestimate our value, like what you talked about. It doesn't mean we have to be in the highest position in order to provide value, or that we have to be perfect, right? And have all the answers, that we're there to listen, right? And help somebody and provide some guidance and coaching. So as you look at that, think about kind of where your strengths are, your weaknesses are, and kind of continue having that dialogue with yourself and taking that assessment and taking it. We're going to continue through that assessment as we move to this DEI lens. So Amber, if you'll forward it to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So where does DEI fit in? Well, many of you have expressed it perfectly, probably even better than this will. But here's some direct quotes that might help amplify how important mentorship and sponsorship can be in this space. So in terms of diversity, Amber, if you'll click on the first quote, mentoring is a method by which organizations can establish a workplace that appreciates and embraces employee differences. The best corporate mentoring programs seek to diversify the workplace by helping employees improve upon the skills they have, matching employees with mentors who can help them learn in a style that is best suited for their needs. Spreading knowledge throughout the organization so that more employees learn a wider array of skills. So this alludes kind of to a formal mentoring program. And today we're kind of talking about individual mentorship and sponsorship. But again, when you think about your strengths and weaknesses, this is also a lens that can be applied to an individual as well. And then when we think about equity, if you can go to the equity quote. Women and ethnic, this will not be a surprise to many of you. You've brought some of this up, both from the equity and the inclusion perspective. Women and ethnic minority professionals may place more value on mentoring because they tend to face more obstacles in progressing in their careers and are seeking advice and counsel that will help them accelerate their development and career progression. Companies looking to better unlock the potential of attracting, developing, and retaining this important employee base should work to foster an environment that embraces mentorship as a part of the corporate culture, further illustrating their commitment to developing their best talent. Again, having a corporate lens on this, but not hard to translate, as you all have, to your individual experiences, right, and stories. And then inclusion, this next quote, I think will speak to many of us. I felt isolated at times as I struggled with the notion that I had to accomplish my objectives alone. I overcame the struggle of rejection and feeling isolated by seeking valuable advice and mentorship from other professionals who had similar experiences. So this is an Ivy League professor, medical examiner, and TEDx speaker who graduated with a doctorate degree in business admin at the age of 24. So many of you have brought up, right, kind of how you were one of the only, right? And that is a huge component, right, of this, this diversity and equity and inclusion lens, right, of making sure we provide support and that we don't want our world to end up being a world of onlys, right? We want a diverse array throughout organizations, throughout businesses. And so when we begin to look at who can we help lift up and who can help lift us up, right? We too can have this diverse lens as we begin to think about that. Any comments, questions about any of these quotes or insights?
I'm sorry. The only thing I would like to add is that it's surprising. Well, I guess it's not surprising. I guess it's disappointing that the same people who are not mentoring or sponsoring, for me, people of color, do it so naturally for people who aren't people of color. Mm-hmm. So for instance, my peers who were white attorneys, or mainly white, I don't know if that's the politically correct way to say it, but they had sponsors and they had mentors, and I had to overcome the lack of that by basically working twice as hard to get half the credit that they received. And so, but they saw the need to mentor those other attorneys, and it was obvious to me that they were being mentored and sponsored. I did very well in my career, but again, I worked really hard at doing well in my career, but it wasn't because of any mentoring or sponsoring I received.
Right. And I think you are highlighting the inequity, right, of what is happening, what happens in mentorship and sponsorship, and why this needs to be such an important aspect of DEI, right? If we really are going to try and create more equity and more inclusion, right, then there needs to be attention of, we can't just mentor people who are like us, and those who mentor and sponsor can't be mentoring and sponsoring people who are just like them. It continues to perpetuate the system. So I may be preaching to the choir, right, in this particular group, but for any of us, right, even there's so many different aspects of diversity, right? So the more that each of us can think about having that lens and looking at giving mentorship and sponsorship to people who may not be like us, or making sure we're receiving mentorship and sponsorship from people who may not like us, we will be creating sort of a more diverse and more equitable and inclusive environment just within our own little sphere. So when we think about that, if we can go to that next slide, and there you've got lots of chats in that, a lot of response, Dean, in the chat, so that you know, in terms of support and people saying so true. So as we kind of wrap it up and we think about these situations and what could be in our sphere of control, right? we can begin to think about in terms of mentorship and sponsorship. Are we seeking diversity? Are we seeking equity? And are we seeking inclusion? Now, I know that given the world circumstances, we might not be able to control all of that, right? But even just having that lens, we can begin to shift that, even in small ways, right? And so as we become kind of to closing today, I want you to really think about this again, in terms of the mentors and sponsors that you have or that you want to have, right? Are you seeking a diverse group of those folks? And vice versa, as you look at who you mentor and who you sponsor. Dina, what you talked about, right? In a changed world, those lawyers, right, who are sponsoring people like them would consciously say, no, I need to sponsor folks, right, who aren't like me so that I am diversifying our firm. I am providing more equitable support.
I think, from my perspective, it's important to have diverse candidates who you're mentoring, because it only makes you better at mentoring. And that is like something that you can easily come across in your work environment, particularly if you're looking at different demographics such as age, experience, also ethnicity, gender identity, and even ability. It's easy when you know the significance and value of it, and when you have something to offer. And I think, when I look at my own personal experience and life experiences, I know that I have something to offer. Is when you feel like you don't have something to offer, you can't fill anybody else's cup if your cup is empty. So a lot of times it's about, making sure that you're healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually, so that you can actually provide that diversity of experiences to people who might be in a dominant group, right? So I don't have a problem mentoring anybody, whether they're Black, white, gay, straight, whatever. It's just them feeling comfortable with me doing so.
What works though? We know that in majority of the cases, I'm going to be very non-PC here, but white people mentor white people because they're uncomfortable to mentor people of color. And because they're not comfortable, because that's not who they deal with on a daily basis. So it becomes, and no offense to you, Mr. Mack, but it becomes very euphoric to say we can mentor anybody, because that's not how the world works. Me as an executive, I have made it my point to hire only Black interns, because I know in my profession of association management, there is a lack, and especially women of color who come up. So I made a point, and I was in a discussion and somebody said to me, a person of color said to me, I can't believe your entire department is Black. And I'm like, yeah, the other department that is entirely white and nobody questions it. But she was uncomfortable to have a whole department of Black people. And I'm like, why? White people hire white people all the time. They bring their sister, their brother, the cousin wife, everybody to the game. So for me, I hire only Black interns. I move them through association management because they don't have any idea, one, that is a profession, that is a valid, enriching economically and personal profession. So I bring them into something new. And as a sponsor, I don't do it within my organization. I do it within my industry, because I believe sometimes you have to move around in order to move up. That sometimes there's not room in the organization to move up, because you can't fire the entire white executive office. So why stay there? Move somewhere else. Just me, but That's how I play mine. What? Because I do have the ability to do so, so I do it.
Yeah, that's powerful. You know, the one thing I would say to that, right? If you think about it, how many, if you go in your workplace, how many organizations have a executive sponsor program where they're training their executives to be sponsors for diverse talent? It doesn't exist. And so you will never get comfortable trying to participate in that process because you just don't think about it. You just go to work and do your job and you really don't think about it.
Well, it also depends on the size of the organization. If you're in a small organization, there's no room sometimes to build those kind of programs because there's no way to go up. So you have to move out.
Yes,
so
I agree.
So you have to look at the situation you're in. But I mean, you know, that's just for me. That's just me. I support people of color anytime, any day.
Well, my executive sponsor basically is sponsoring me, not necessarily to stay within the company. They're mentoring and coaching and saying, hey, it might not be a place for you here, but I'm helping you so that you can go where you want to go if you need to leave here. And that is really what an executive sponsor is doing.
And I employ them. So as a DEI executive, I make it clear to my organization that be prepared, and it's very valid that we bring people up, but be prepared for them to leave because we have to diversify, but not necessarily here because there may be no space, but we can diversify somewhere else by really developing a strong leader and a strong employee.
Yes, great. So wonderful input, wonderful discussion. I'm going to just jump in because we only have a couple minutes. And first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for leading each other, right? And sharing with each other. There are many, you can go back, Amber, because I do want to end with that. There are, as you can see, many layers to this. And like any topic, but especially in DEI, it is complicated, right? And everybody's story is going to be different, right? And Enid, for you, because of the situation in your organization, in your industry, right? You are intentionally, right, picking and mentoring and sponsoring people of color, and then enabling them to diversify their career and owning and having power. And so how I want to end today is each of you kind of taking whatever, you know, your own kind of power and your own goals and really thinking about some commitments that you want to make in terms of whether it's getting a mentor or sponsor. There were people in the chat who put in there they would love a sponsor or a mentor. It's probably hard to get a sponsor from today. But if you see in the chat somebody who's looking for some mentorship, every single one of you here is a mentor. There is no doubt in my mind. You have enough history to share. You have enough professional experience. Every single one of you could be mentoring each other. So if you are willing to mentor, go for it, reach out to that person. Take a moment though, you know, to think about some commitments. I always like to end a session, right, with people feeling some sense of empowerment to go and make some kind of change in how they're going to approach something or intentionally continue doing something they are going to continue doing. And let me say, if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me. Feel free, please connect with me. If you'll go to the last slide, Amber, on LinkedIn, I will confess. I check LinkedIn a lot. I don't post a lot, but any questions or anything, if you want to reach out to me there, feel free, or you can always reach out to me via email. Amber, if you'll go to the last slide, there you go. There's all my contact information. An honor and a privilege to be with all of you today and keep that chat alive and well. Thank you, everybody. So Amber, you can save the chat, right?
Let's see, I believe you can.
let's make sure we save it. So if
Yep.
anyone needs some follow-up or, I want to make sure if there is the ability to connect any couple folks or whatever, we have that for people.
Yeah, so I saved the chat.
Great.
Also, I'm gonna stop sharing really quick so we can get this picture because everyone's
Oh,
following
yeah,
up.
yeah. Stop sharing.
I'm like, wait, no.
All
I
right,
need to-
those who can stay, just pop on for a minute